We will get the afternoon session started, and first up we will hear the Missouri S&T campus highlights from Interim Chancellor Maples. But before he speaks, I want to give you a little bit of a rundown about Chancellor Maples and his leadership. Since joining Missouri S&T in 2017 as interim chancellor, Dr. Maples made great strides in each of the 5 Missouri compacts, therefore serving the University of Missouri system in the state. During times of uncertainty in higher education, Dr. Maples has brought a sense of stability to the community. Under his leadership, the following accomplishments have been realized. Student success, creation of the finish line and the full load to finish scholarships to remove barriers for students nearing graduation. Attendance at many student events, including often traveling to student design competition and athletic events to cheer on the minors. Led the effort to upgrade Missouri S&T's status to highly selective and gained approval for the change from the Missouri Coordinating Board of Higher Education, making S&T one of the 2 state universities to attain this designation. Research and creative works. Increased research and PhD activity that resulted in significant rise in U.S. News graduate rankings. S&T secured a $2 million contract to develop engineering program at the Gulf University of Science and Technology in Kuwait. Work with President Choi on securing funds for the Clayco Advanced Construction and Materials Laboratory, which will continue to elevate Missouri S&T's reputation as a national leader in infrastructure research. Engagement and outreach. With support from Missouri General Assembly, S&T and Missouri State University expanded their cooperative engineering program based in Springfield, Missouri, to include mechanical engineering. Build new partnerships in local community, including formal agreement with the Kaleidoscope Discovering Center, a nonprofit center that encourages STEM education among pre-college students. Developed a partnership with the Acute Effects of Neurotrauma Consortium to leverage S&T's expertise in traumatic brain injury research with Fort Leonard Wood Military Base, the Leonard Wood Institute, and Phelps Health. Inclusive excellence. As a champion for diversity inclusion, established Missouri S&T's first Chief Diversity Officer position. Supportive of the Chancellor's Committee for Diversity and Inclusion, as well as Chancellor's Advisory Committee on African American Recruitment and Retention. Champions employees, collaborating with the staff council leaders to identify and address concerns and acknowledge employees. Established a Center for Advancing Faculty Excellence to support faculty development. Revamped the university's former freshman engineering program to meet the needs of all students as a first-year experience program. Planning, operation, and stewardship. Restructured the research and graduate studies to combine the 2 units and streamline operations. Supported students' efforts to complete a fitness center expansion that will open soon. Strengthened relations with alumni and friends, supporting fundraising successes, including the largest gift to Missouri S&T's history, resulting in $22.6 million in gifts during the 2017-18 fiscal year, the 2nd highest fundraising year on record. My pleasure to introduce again Interim Chancellor Chris Maples.
Thank you very much, Curator Sumvolt, President Choi, Board of Curators, everybody. One of the great things about getting to be at S&T or being the chancellor at any of our universities is we get to jump in front of the parade. But it's everybody that makes all of that happen. So the things that you hear about that happened during my watch is the work of so many other people. And I just want to acknowledge a great team, a great group of staff, a great group of faculty, and terrific students. And you heard from some of them at lunch today. It's an absolute joy. So I am always happy to host our curators at S&T and to talk about a few of the things that are occurring on our campus. Many of you are familiar with our Mars Rover design team. They are the world champions of the University Rover Championship from 2 years ago. They're the reigning national, actually North American champions now this year. They are irked that a university from Poland beat them last year, and they have renewed fire to go get the world championship this year. and they will return to the deserts of Hanksville, Utah. Everybody who's been to Hanksville, Utah? Yeah, it's you can see why they call it a Mars rover test place when you get there. It's cool. And it's one of our 20 design teams at S&T. Our teams attract a wide range of students and not just engineers. And wait. Push the right one. So the chief financial officer of the team, the person that you see on the left there, Taya Thomas, is a business major. Taya is shown here with the team with Andrew Rausch, who's our mechanical engineering major, Curator Sumvolt, and our mascot, Joe Minor, during Legislative Day in February. 2 years ago, the team CEO was a business major, not an engineer. So when we talk about this being all the majors and all the options, we really mean it. I will also tell you that being in universities that have similar design teams, this is one of the few where freshmen get involved right off the bat. And they're able to do this throughout their undergraduate career at S&T. And I will point out that the success of these collaborative design teams is in no small part due also to faculty guidance and the classes that students take here. Many of you are by now familiar with this image, which was on every major news site and every social media network yesterday. This is one of a series of direct images of a black hole, the first of any such images ever recorded from the galaxy Messier 87, M87, which is a mere 55 million light years away from the Milky Way galaxy. It's pretty close, actually, all things considered. This image and the others were published yesterday in a series of papers in Astrophysical Journal Letters, and this project involved over 200 students from around the world, including a Missouri S&T graduate. Dr. Frederick Backinoff earned his Bachelor of Science degree in physics from S&T in 1985 and is now a research scientist in the Cavalli Institute of Astrophysics and Space Research at MIT. Fred is the co-author of 2 of the papers that were published yesterday. He's been involved in this international collaboration since 2009 as part of a group of scientists who made the case for building the Event Horizon Telescope, which captured this stunning image. Fred attributes much of his success as a researcher to his Rolla education and gratefully acknowledges the scholarship support he received as a recipient of the Curators Scholarship, as well as support from our Alumni Association and other scholarships. So a Curator Scholarship Award winner, part of this black hole success. So kudos to the board. Missouri S&T has experienced great research success over the past several months. Here are just a few of the highlights. We have a $2.9 million Department of Energy grant to develop fast charging systems for electric vehicles. A $1 million NSF grant for cyber physical systems research. Dr. Heng Pan, our Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering Department, received a prestigious NSF Career Award, and these awards provide support for junior faculty's research. Jag Sarangapani, professor of electrical and computer engineering, was named a fellow of the National Academy of Inventors. We've had record royalty. We have already broken last year's record with several months left in this year in terms of royalty income coming in. And we have several things in the queue that I suspect are going to continue to really develop and provide some revenue stream ultimately for the university, for the inventors, for the companies that are involved in this. And so I'm excited about the royalty income. Here you see just some of the inventions that have come out of what we have done at Missouri S&T. Everything from bioactive glass to microwave imaging software to advanced manufacturing software. There's a plethora of opportunities here to develop collaborations, to have business spin-offs, to connect students with opportunities for them going forward, but as much as anything else, to have that entrepreneurial spirit pervasive within the classrooms, with our faculty, with our graduates moving forward. You look at college rankings, U.S. News & World Report just issued their 2020 rankings in March. S&T leapfrogged from 106th place in the 2019 rankings to 82nd place. That's a rise of 24 slots. I think that that's probably the highest rise of any university in the country within this list. And I want to thank very much the work that was done in the CEC Dean's office, from Angela Luking and to Rich Welson, both, and all of the CEC department chairs and departments. Rich attributes this growth to several items: an increase in research expenditures, growth of research expenditures per faculty member, growth in the number of PhDs, and ongoing efforts to raise our profile and enhance our reputation. When you look at new research initiatives, you're going to hear a little bit about some of these later. We've launched several new research initiatives in recent months that we believe will further strengthen the research and scholarship at Missouri S&T and within the University of Missouri system. Several of these initiatives are multidisciplinary and cross the boundaries of STEM and the humanities and liberal arts. We have our Center for Science, Technology, and Society, which brings together those in the STEM fields with researchers in the humanities, social sciences, and liberal arts to address issues of global importance involving technology, such as biology, biological engineering, climate change, the ethical debates surrounding the use of social media, and other things. Our university's participation in the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, LIGO, I can do better, a collaboration of researchers who are working to detect cosmic gravitational waves. The research explores the fundamental physics of gravity through the emerging field of gravitational wave science as a tool for astronomical discovery. LIGO involves around 1,200 scientists from 18 countries and over 100 universities. We're the only university in the state affiliated with this research. And much of this was brought to us by Dr. Marco Cavaglia, who's a professor of physics who joined the S&T faculty in January, who brought this affiliation and the work that he had been doing from the University of Mississippi. We have a partnership with U.S. Army, Phelps Health, the University of Missouri, Kansas City, University of Missouri, Columbia, to address the issue of traumatic brain injury. And I will not go through a bunch of this because you're going to hear more about it and you've seen more about the successes that have come with that. But suffice it to say that we are connecting with military relevance and the importance of DoD kind of research. And that connection with Fort Leonard Wood, our proximity there, and our recognition of the needs of Fort Leonard Wood and their soldiers is an important aspect of this. And we would not be able to do this if we could not bring the resources of the entire system with us. That's the real critical part for this research with DoD. Okay, so now you're going to get to hear from the experts. And I will introduce two people who are doing this great work with brain trauma. Dr. Catherine Johnson, Assistant Professor of Mining and Explosives Engineering, who is doing some important research related to blast-induced TBI, traumatic brain injury. And Dr. Casey Burton, who is a graduate of Missouri S&T, earned his bachelor's degree in chemistry in 2013 and PhD in that same discipline in 2017. And he's now the Director of Research at Phelps Health and an adjunct professor of chemistry here at S&T. And they are talking now. You're on.
Thank you for the introduction and invitation to speak here today. I want to talk a little bit about a project that we've worked on for the last 4 or so years, initially funded through the Department of Defense as a collaboration between us here and also School of Medicine at Mizzou. So the first thing I want to sort of bring to your attention is this sort of broad determination and definition of TBI, which is basically just any acquired brain injury caused by some sort of external force. kind of put a lot of things under that bracket. The four main things being a blast wave impacting the brain, head acceleration or whiplash, so a car injury, thoracic, which is sort of a chest impact that's then translating to the brain, and also something penetrating the brain. So those bottom three, we can study those. They have been pretty extensively studied, but it's this top one that is a blast wave impacting the brain that allows us with the only US institution with an explosives program to sort of be a leader in that, and hopefully that's what we will become and be known for. So we've also got three severities of that that we'll talk a bit more about, but mild, moderate, and severe. Mild being the toughest one to diagnose and the most common that we see within our troops. So consequences, hopefully not my brain, but with the work that we do here, but we're talking about headaches, dizziness in the short term, and on the long term, Alzheimer's, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And really the takeaway here is every single one of those consequences is also associated with something else. There's actually no diagnostic tool that is individual just a traumatic brain injury, so it makes diagnosing these things quite difficult to isolate just that TBI. These are just some stats. I'm an engineer, I like numbers, but this is from the Department of Defense, just looking at really how many of those cases are mild. So over 82% are those mild cases, and there's probably an awful lot more that are undiagnosed for some of those reasons that I've mentioned already. So how am I helping with that? We have an open field blast model that we've been working on for about 4 years, as I said, working with different animals, and we've got research going on the cause, some of the diagnostic options, treatment, and hopefully in the future prevention as well. So if I hopefully play this video, there we go. So that flash was a ball of C4 about 3 meters away from here, and we can see that initial shock front coming through. And straight away, we see that reflection coming off, and then it's followed by another ground reflection wave coming through. So this is recorded at about 80,000 frames per second, and the speed of that initial wave was about 400 meters per second, with a reflection of about 300 meters per second. So where is that extra energy going, and how is that translating to the injuries that we see for this traumatic brain injury? So the last thing I want to talk about here is all of this and how it relates. So this graph is looking at two of the main shock physics parameters that we look at, which is the peak pressure, the maximum pressure that's exerted, and also impulse, which is pressure over time. So this is a whole host of different data points, a lot that we've done, and also other researchers. And through that, we can start to distinguish whether it is mild, moderate, and severe. And by us plotting it in this way, we can really quite clearly see some of those defined areas and kind of for the first time really be able to see what pressure and what impulse is relating to the types of injuries that we have. If we kind of take a step back to some of the previous wars, we had a lot of lung damage, eardrum rupture. They were the kind of things we heard about before. They've all been studied. We've got better protective gear. We've got hearing protection, and we really don't see those anymore. But traumatic brain injury is what we're seeing more these days. So all of those are moving up and out. And those curves are lung injury, threshold, and different levels, and those vertical lines being eardrum rupture. If we overlay these graphs that we've kind of created and looked at with traumatic brain injury, we can really see, especially on that mild level, that we're actually below thresholds for eardrum rupture for previous wars on both pressure and impulse, with currently no protection. We protect from penetration and bullets, but we don't protect from the blast wave that we see. So hopefully, I've shown a little bit that there's a lot to do. Hopefully, there's a lot that us as a system can do and will do. And I want to invite Dr. Casey Burton up here to talk a little bit more about the collaborations that we have.
Well, good afternoon. Again, my name is Dr. Casey Burton. I have the dual honor of serving as both the Director of Medical Research at Phelps Health across the street, as well as an adjunct professor right here in our own Department of Chemistry. It is my pleasure to talk to you today about our research efforts in developing a simple urine test to detect and screen for traumatic brain injury. Before I jump into that, I just want to quickly acknowledge my fantastic team members, which include Dr. Honglan Shi in chemistry, Dr. Paul Nam, also in chemistry, and Dr. Don James, who is working at Phelps Health. I love Catherine's last couple of slides because it's a perfect segue into my research presentation. These slides show that our military personnel are regularly receiving blast exposures capable of inducing traumatic brain injury as part of their everyday operations. In fact, 85% of all military traumatic brain injuries occur not in active combat zones, but as a result of training activities. However, like Catherine pointed out, current methods to detect and screen for traumatic brain injury, and by extension identify those training procedures that are most at risk for producing a traumatic brain injury, those methods rely on cognitive assessments or advanced neuroimaging techniques that tend to be either subjective or utterly impractical for use in the field. For that reason, Colonel Pete Nielsen, who was the commander for the General Leonard Wood Army Community Hospital at Fort Leonard Wood at the time, he approached us a couple of years ago. He had heard about our P-scan technology developed right here at Missouri S&T that was being used to detect and screen for breast cancer. He approached us and posed a very simple question. Could we take this same technology, the same concept, and translate it for traumatic brain injury? I have 800 young men walking into my hospital each year with traumatic brain injuries. I want to put a fix to this. And the answer is yes, we could do that. So what we have done is we have built an integrated panel of biomarkers, so-called molecular fingerprint, which is an assortment of neurotransmitters, oxidative stress biomarkers, trauma markers, and just general metabolic dysfunction biomarkers. And by having this molecular fingerprint, we can actually probe the unique pathophysiological processes associated with TBI. Again, no two traumatic brain injuries are identical, but by looking at 20 different biomarkers, I have 8 shown up here, we can actually look and distinguish those different types of biomarkers, which will allow us to better understand the nature of the injury and how best to prescribe treatment for mitigating those long-term effects. We recently received a major award from the Leonard Wood Institute to validate this novel approach in 2 clinical studies at Fort Leonard Wood involving military personnel. Our ultimate goal is to translate that back to a handheld portable device, not unlike our P-scan technology that can be marketed to both civilian and military applications. Finally, I want to point out that this research was made possible through our membership within the Acute Effects of Neurotrauma Consortium. This consortium is built around a 3-way partnership between the U.S. Army, Phelps Health, and the Leonard Wood Institute. Last year, the University of Missouri joined the consortium to take advantage of the unique opportunities afforded to its members, and primarily through the channels it has developed through the military. Those opportunities include actually being able to actively collaborate with military stakeholders without getting in the way of their everyday operations and training mission, which has been critical to expanding medical research opportunities with the fort and potentially other military installations. And I think that has come to bear. We just awarded 14 projects, at least 10 of which went to University of Missouri faculty members to the tune of about $9 million. And we're hoping through this consortium membership, we'll be able to expand those medical research opportunities, not just to traumatic brain injury, but to other clinical applications as well. And with that, I would like to invite Chancellor Maples back to the lectern. Thank you.
All right, it is now my pleasure, thank you, Casey and Catherine, very much. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Shannon Fogg, Professor and Chair of History and Political Science here at Missouri S&T. She joined the S&T faculty in 2004, became Chair of History and Political Science in July 2015. She received Missouri S&T's Woman of the Year Award in April 2014. Her research focuses on the history of modern France with an emphasis on social history. Picture of her would be helpful, with an emphasis on social history and on daily life in France during and after World War II. She's the author of the books The Politics of Everyday Life in Vichy France, Foreigners, Undesirables, and Strangers, published in 2008, and Stealing Home, Looting, Restitution, and Reconstructing Jewish Lives in France, 1942 to 1947, which was published in 2017. Dr. Fogg.
Thank you very much for inviting me today to speak with you. And as you might have picked up from the introduction, I have spent the last 15 years here at Missouri S&T and have built my career without researching or teaching anything directly related to science and or technology. And that is the case for many of the faculty members in our department. We have specialists in military history, Missouri history, the social history of World War I and World War II, colonial America, the Reformation, music, film, and the American West, in addition to historians of science and technology, and political scientists that focus on both the US and the wider world. They've earned national and international reputations. Their research is published by Oxford, Cambridge, Toronto, and the University of Missouri Presses. And they teach majors that go on to become highly successful teachers, professors, business leaders, lawyers, and even two-star generals that are also lawyers. And I think you can read more about General Mahaney in the alumni magazine that you have on your tables today. I want to highlight some of the recent activities taking place on campus related to the humanities, and also offer a broader view of the importance of these fields on a campus that is traditionally known for its strengths in science and engineering. If you take anything away from my talk today, I hope it will be that STEM and the humanities aren't either or. They are always both STEM and the humanities. We can clearly see the interrelated nature of STEM and the humanities in our classrooms. As part of a grant from the U.S. Department of Education and one from the National Endowment for the Humanities, Dr. Kathleen Shepard had the opportunity to develop a new course in the history of science in Latin America. With the support of the Wikipedia Education Foundation, she introduced a semester-long experiential learning assignment to promote student engagement and support student learning. Pairs of students selected an article related to science in Latin America on Wikipedia to edit. They analyzed the article for content gaps, did research, and wrote additional text that was then peer-reviewed. Using critical thinking, research, writing, and editing skills from the humanities and their own knowledge from STEM fields, the students wrote for a public audience within the standards of scholarly publication. By the end of the first semester, the 26 students in the class had added 28,300 words to Wikipedia in 11 different articles ranging from Aztec society to Spanish missions in the Americas. Their edited articles have been viewed over 1 million times. This interaction between STEM and humanities also takes place in classes that aren't obviously labeled science. Last fall, students in a course on Nazi Germany and the Holocaust worked on a service learning project for 8th graders at Rolla Junior High School. Students created a pop-up museum as well as educational packets and activities for the English language arts classes that were reading the Diary of Anne Frank. The main objectives of the assignment were for our students to do research, critically analyze sources, and share that information with others. In their reflections, many of the S&T students commented specifically on what they learned from the project in the context of their engineering education. One student wrote, "As someone who has been focused on engineering courses these past few years, I have been able to learn more about the Holocaust and the Nazi rise to power than I ever would have expected. Understanding the Holocaust and the Jewish plight have made me more sympathetic and aware of events happening today, Syrian refugees, migrant caravan, etc., and has given me a different perspective. I intend to use what I have learned about research in my future coursework and graduate school endeavors, and I believe the writing I've done in this class will help me significantly when preparing to take the GRE." Another noted, "Most of my other school projects are focused around math and science, but this topic really hits you in the heart. It is a shame that the Holocaust and the things that happened during that time frame are almost unknown to a lot of people, but that is why we are doing this project, to spread knowledge. I deal with numbers and theories every day, and to go to this class and learn about actual events was a great learning experience for me." Our students recognize that their humanities courses are not just bonus, added-on value, but an essential part of their education, while our humanities students also benefit from the understanding of science and access to technology that they get at Missouri S&T. The grand challenges that we hope to address with our engineering and scientific advances are always to benefit people and the societies in which we live. They are also created and implemented by people. STEM cannot and should not stand alone, and the mindset that there is a difference between STEM and the humanities artificially separates disciplines. The sciences and the arts have always been connected, and continue to be here at Missouri S&T. S&T is a premier public technological research university, specifically because it is a place where students can get a world-class education in whatever field they choose. Drawing on our strengths in technology, arts, humanities, sciences, and business, we continue to discover, create, and innovate to serve the state and the world. Thank you, and I'd like to invite Chris back.
So a reminder, you heard a little bit about the history of the system this morning. We are coming up on 150 years here in Phelps County. Instead of Ironton, we were almost in Iron County and Ironton. They were making a huge push for it. Our celebration for Homecoming 2020 will start that. It'll be a grand time here. Hopefully you get a feeling for the comprehensive nature that we have here in terms of the engineering, but also the humanities and arts, and how this all integrates into a total student experience and a lot of options and opportunities, not just for our students, but for our faculty and for our alumni. I will open the floor to questions and ask all three of our speakers to be able to come up and answer questions that you may have of any of them.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, I have a question for Dr. Burton, Dr. Johnson. Where do you test? I mean, where is testing done?
Far away from here.
The testing we've done so far has all been at our experimental mine, so a couple miles from here, the 20-acre site that we have associated with our mining engineering program. So it's all been done on that site so far.
And
Great.
for biospecimens, we collect those actually at Fort Leonard Wood, at the General Leonard Wood Army Community Hospital. And we take those back here to Missouri S&T and process and analyze those samples here.
Mm-hmm. Great. Can you schedule a blast next time we're here as a board?
I would be happy
We would
to.
love to visit.
Yeah,
Yes.
let me know. I'll be happy
Thank
to do
you.
that. Yeah.
Any others?
Actually, Dr. Choi, they didn't think they needed a blast to observe the effects of TBI on the board. That's what's really going on. We're being observed.
I'll take biospecimens after.
Well put. Well put. Thank you. All right.
They took our buttons away, so I don't know if we're on.
Yeah, you're on now all the time.
Were the buttons a failed experiment?
They were a reach.
They were quickly removed.
So you've opened the eyes of many of us to experiential learning, and I think maybe stars within our complex in that regard. What about your online learning? When I first came on the board, I learned that you had not only in-house for your students, but also with employers through the country, some online programs that serve the needs of employers. We're about to enter a new era where the university is encouraging e-learning. There will be a platform that programs from each campus can migrate onto, and you have some unique programs. I'm curious about what your thoughts are about the opportunities here for S&T to be a part of that migration, and what you think the future is on this campus for e-learning.
I guess I can go ahead with that. I'm like, Chancellor Maples is here maybe. I think we're ahead of the curve actually from a lot of universities on distance learning, experimental learning, especially with the Explosives program. We offer all of our degrees online, whether it's a undergraduate certificate, graduate certificate, even our master's and PhD are all fully online, as well as on campus. Obviously, experimental learning is a big thing. Me, for example, this semester I'm teaching an instrumentation class that how do you teach that distance? You know, a lot of it, I feel like you need to have that on-hands experience. So I do have 25 students from across the country coming here next weekend to get that hands-on learning alongside the distance that we do on a week-to-week basis online. So I think it's very possible, and it's, you know, our job, I guess, to figure out how to make that beneficial for on-campus and distance. But yeah, I think it's an important thing we can and are doing.
Before you pass the baton, your particular area of study is probably unique within the system. And even though there may be other humanities that may form the basis of the humanities portion of the platform, yours would be unique and might be part of a Western Civ, even though, you know, you're known for science and technology, but you have some uniquenesses even in those areas on this campus. But it's probably incumbent on you as professors to know that that opportunity exists and make it known as the selection process begins. So I applaud you for having the diversity of knowledge here on this campus, and encourage all the faculty here to either continue developing your e-learning programs locally or look for that migration onto the platform. I didn't want to go on to, I see the Chancellor is behind you. He's probably got a few things to say about that as well.
I'm just going to sneak in and say a couple of things. We have a number of our distance education graduate courses that are ranked very highly nationally. And what we have done over the years is really work to get more of a faculty integration with distance education. You know, we realize, and you see that the board realizes that more and more people are place-bound in terms of where they are going to classes. And so we have to deliver to them in many respects. Hence, you see the connection with all the universities working collaboratively together to work with other universities and to be able to offer things where students are. So we are very committed to that and continuing to move forward with it.
Any other questions? Chancellor Maples, thank you very much. Drs. Johnson, Dr. Fogg, Dr. Burton, thank you. Impressive stuff, always. Next up, critical issue discussion. Data analytics. Joining us will be Chris Riley-Tillman and Matt Martins.
Second, Martins.
Martins. And I think one of you, maybe Chris, has a birthday today.
Oh, great.
I became a year older in one day.
All right, so Chairman Sundvold, we have a very special presentation today that's really going to delve into the principle that universities, public research universities, must establish aspirational goals to achieve excellence. And these goals must use objective measures and measures that are used at other top public research universities. Now today, Chris Riley-Tillman and Matt Martins will present some very innovative tools that not only illustrate how we are performing when measured against other similar programs, but also, just as importantly, how do we use the data to help inform not only our faculty but administrators to achieve the type of faculty success that we expect? So this is going to be a very interactive presentation. We encourage members of the board and the audience to ask questions throughout. And with that, let me turn it over to Chris Riley-Tillman and Matt Martins.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk a little bit about how we're using data, as President Choi said, for program improvement purposes, but also for making better decisions on our campuses. A couple things I want to say to kind of set the stage for this discussion. One is that I think it's fair to say what we're doing here reflects a pretty dramatic culture shift on our campus in terms of how we use data, how we share data, how we promote data. I think we've always had good data analysts on our campuses, who are very, proficient in what they do. But what we're doing now in terms of really organizing and integrating data and using it in a way to make kind of more structural, big picture decisions, I think really reflects a culture shift that is the responsibility of certainly our campus leadership and some of the decisions they've made. I mean, really, Chancellor Cartwright is responsible for getting a lot of this going, but for it to be successful, we need a system president, we need a chancellor, and we need a provost who are all kind of on the same page and saying, yes, this is what we're going to do. Because some of the uses of these data can certainly cause a little bit of blowback and can cause some concern. So it's critical that our most senior administrators are really committed to this process, and that certainly seems to be the case. This also, what we're doing really kind of illustrates a effective collaboration between campus and system. So what we're working on, right now involves, at the University of Missouri, Columbia, our IR shop. So Marty Eimers and his group working really effectively with Jeff Elliott and his group in order to sort of pull together what we need and get the systems together. And then sort of the last piece, and this is kind of, pat on the back time, we get the sense that nobody is really doing what we're doing here. So some of the stuff that you're going to see today, universities are pulling pieces from. Okay, so they're using this piece or they're using that piece, but we have folks that just got back from the AAU Data Exchange, and they were kind of blown away with what we're doing here in terms of pulling. You want me to drop this down? In terms of what we're doing, integrating campus data with national comparative data, pulling it all together in one piece. So the first thing that we're going to look at are these research and teaching scorecards. So you want to pull up the animal sciences one. So right now, I'm going to stand maybe over here. So right now, and these are available to anybody within the campus. So they're basically available to anybody who can log into the University of Missouri system. This presents kind of a broad department overview that we are now fully using as part of our department review processes, program review processes, helping to make strategic decisions and those sorts of things. So let me walk through this real quick so you can kind of get a sense for what these data are looking at. So I'm actually going to stand over here because I think it'll be a little bit easier for me. So first of all, it's always dangerous to give me a laser pointer. See, I can't even use it right. Oh, here we go. So these data here come from the Academic Analytics database, and they provide benchmark data. So Academic Analytics is really the only source that you have, comprehensive source, to get benchmark data in terms of research activity. So, what are your units doing relative to their peer institutions? And so what we have here are two different comps. So we compare to other universities nationwide. So these are other universities that have doctoral programs. And then we also have a comp group that is AAU public institutions. And so it's unit by unit. So what we're doing here is we're comparing animal sciences at Mizzou to animal science programs nationwide, and then animal science programs at other AAU public institutions. And this is what I was referring to earlier, where we're worked with academic analytics, gathered the data from them, transferred it to this format, but then we put together our own custom comp groups. And so you can see, really how well your units are doing. You're not just relying on stories. Oh yeah, we've got a great animal sciences program. Okay, well how come? Well, we've got a great animal sciences program. Everybody knows this. Well, let's see the data. And so you can see some of these metrics here. So average yearly journal articles per faculty. So basically how many articles per year is the average faculty member in the unit publishing? At Mizzou, average is 3.15, above the national mean, right around the AAU public mean. And that's a pretty good benchmark for us, we think, in terms of the AAU public. Awards per faculty lifetime, you can see where that is. Number of citations. And then grant dollars, the grant dollar data will differ a little bit because they're different sources. One is the total grant dollars here at the bottom. This is a more restricted indicator of grant dollars based on mostly highly prestigious federal grants, and it's only tracked by principal investigators, so it's a little bit more limited. But what's really most important is the comparison. So you can see the average faculty member in animal sciences has had almost $370,000 as a PI over the time period that's covered in this, compared to a national average of about $116,000. So what does that tell us? That tells us that on that particular metric, our animal sciences faculty are doing well above both the national average and the AAU public average. Yes?
You may have said this, so I missed it. But when you use the term Mizzou, I've heard it said that S&T was a land-grant college as well. The others, we sometimes say, well, we're all part land-grant. Is the Mizzou a reference to the university as a whole or the Columbia campus?
Just the Columbia campus.
Okay,
so each university within the system will eventually have their own.
Yeah, where we are right now is we started building these scorecards really on the backside of the program review task force, and we're doing it specifically for the Columbia campus. Right now, there's talks with UMKC. I think there's been some talks with S&T about how do we port those over. Since we're doing them with the data warehousing shop through system, where all the data is stored, it's very, very easy once we figure out the different pieces to move it over to the other universities, but then really allow them to customize. Are there variables that they would like to focus on a little bit more? Are there slightly different definitions, et cetera? So using the same platform, but flexing it out enough to hit the particular strategic priorities that they're going through. So
will the other campuses be compared against AAU or selected comparable?
They can make that decision themselves.
I think they would make that decision themselves, right?
So this works for Columbia, right? So maybe S&T has a kind of a select set of peer similar types of institutions that they put in there. The national comp is kind of a baseline. Like that's what the database, the academic analytics database uses as sort of its baseline comp. But then you can customize within there in a way that that meets your needs.
One of the thoughts I was getting talking with Kristen at UMSL, my expectation would be is we've taken our particular crack at this and gone in our direction. I would gather when the other universities start to hit this, I think they're going to have some neat ideas on different things to look at. And then by using system as the base, we can port those back to the other universities when some good ideas come up. So this was one particular perspective which I like, and it's developed. But I suspect that they'll be living, and well, they are living. They continue to change, but really continue to develop as everybody takes a shot at them.
So, Curator Phillips, when we work with the other universities, obviously we're going to allow them to have their peers and their aspirants as comparators. But the most important comparator here is the national model. How do we compare nationally? Now, in the case of Mizzou, because it's AAU, there's a ready-made comparison group. But one thing we don't want to do is cherry-pick our peers to make ourselves look good. So we have to make sure that it's a very rigorous process that we use to identify peers and aspirants.
That's interesting. When we've showed these scorecards, one of the things that gets tough is, if you're AAU public average, that's great. I mean that's an extraordinarily strong comparison group up there. So there's sometimes a push that you should be above average on everything. Now we're putting up exactly where we would like to be, and once we hit that bar consistently, I mean that's versus setting something a little bit lower and then rising above it.
So then some of the other pieces of data on these sheets. These are overall grant dollars per year for the unit based on shared credit. And as I said, this is going to differ from this number because this is the total amount of grant dollars. It counts for co-investigator status. It counts for grants that are not captured by the academic analytics database. So this gives you just kind of an overall picture, essentially of how much revenue, again, based on shared credit, is being attributed to the unit. Now, we don't have national comps for this, of course, because that just doesn't exist. But you can see kind of within your own institution, sort of where different units are.
Matt, one of the things that on the original versions of these, the page where you pop it up, you can get the previous year's iterations. And so we can look at this data also trend over time to see if a particular units, if their dollars are going up or if they're going down, if they're going up in particular areas or going down in particular areas.
And this is a per faculty number, and this is a total. But you can see between 2014 and 2018, animal science averaged about $7.5 million a year in total external expenditures. And then kind of piggybacking on President Choi's point, what we decided to do at MU, because we are an AAU institution, is break it down by the grants that count as AAU Phase 1 indicators and AAU Phase 2 indicators. So you can see the majority of the funding in animal sciences, over $6.2 million, is funding that counts as a primary AAU indicator. So we have this piece, and then over here we have all of our student data. So it's credit hours, it's the average number of degrees per year. So this unit's averaging 13 master's degrees per year, 110 undergraduate degrees, 5 PhDs per year. We break this out by ratios in terms of number of degrees per faculty and that sort of stuff. And of course, there's going to be differences across different departments. I mean, we have bigger departments, we have smaller departments. We all know that, as a field, psychology is considerably more popular as a major than geological sciences. So of course, we have more students in those areas, but it kind of gives us an overall benchmark in terms of where units are. And what by breaking it out can do, even a unit like animal sciences that's doing well, you might say, well, you're only at the AAU public average in terms of publications, whereas you're 3 times above average in terms of grant faculty or grant dollars per faculty. So maybe your faculty aren't publishing as much as perhaps they could be. So perhaps we could do a little, do some things to try to emphasize that a little bit more. So one, as I was saying, as a university and my role in the provost office, this is invaluable for program review, and it allows us to ask much better questions during the program review process. But this is also, I think, valuable internally to allow units to really kind of parse out where their strengths and areas of improvement are. If you get into the actual academic analytics database itself, which our department chairs all have access to, you can really drill down into some different areas. So why don't you pull up the English sheet. So we want to show a different department just to kind of give you a contrast in terms of how this works in a scholarly area that has very different metrics, okay? So English department, we know that there is not quite as much federal funding available for English faculty as there is for animal sciences faculty. We know that if you're in the English department and you're an English faculty member, the prestigious scholarly outcomes are different than if you're in engineering or if you're in life sciences. And so you can see this is reflected in the data here. So, in the humanities, they're really kind of book-based disciplines, right? So the most prestigious outcomes are typically, scholarly books. So the metric we really look at here, we we translated it in terms of average years to publish a book per faculty.
And this was something Alex had come up with. I mean, how do you turn in books something that takes multiple years, how do you turn that into a meaningful variable to think about how long does it take to publish something? So it's kind of a neat way to think about how somebody goes about their career and how they publish and the amount of time it takes.
And so, I come from psych sciences. It's like, I have no idea how long it typically takes to, publish books in a field. I mean, mine's a journal discipline. Is it 3 years? Is it 7 years? Is it 10 years? Well, what we see is the typical faculty member at MU in this department is publishing a book about every 5.5 years. Without this comp data, I would have no idea what that means, relative to, to national norms. Well, it turns out nationally, it's about 6.5 years for faculty members in graduate departments of English to publish a book, whereas the AAU public, it's right around every 5 years. So our faculty on this particular metric are consistent with where we would expect them to be. Then you can see the journal articles. There's a lot fewer journal articles that are published in English because they're spending all their time writing their books. But there are some, and you can see how we compare there. Not nearly as much grant data, of course. So that's not critical from a comp perspective. But I think one of the things that really surprised us as we started to look at this was, really? Like, English has $130,000 a year in grant dollars? Like, that was kind of a surprise. And so we've had a number of these along the way where we'd have units that we did not really think would make significant contributions to some of our metrics. In fact they are. Now, of course, it's not going to be as high as animal sciences or chemistry or physics, but they're making contributions, nonetheless. And then you can see, over here the student data again. You'll get a huge number of average total undergraduate credits in English. 25,253. Why is that so much bigger than animal sciences? Well, for a couple of reasons, but one is the gen ed requirement, right? So our units that are teaching a lot of gen ed courses will really see that through this process of looking at the student credit hours. So you can see they average about the same number of undergraduate degrees as animal sciences, but they have considerably more, undergraduate credits because of the gen ed piece. So like I said, we have these available for all of our departments as part of our program review process, our 5-year process. They get, the link to this, and it's like, hey, we expect you to discuss this, as part of your review, as part of the annual updates. We're asking them to refer to these, and as Chris was saying earlier, they really are living documents. We have a meeting every other week with Jeff and his team, and as things come up, we make changes to the scorecards, and then they're updated, right away. I think the data's updated, like some of the data points are updated every 6 months. Right. Some are going to be updated every year because like the grant data comes in once a year. But now that we have it, institutionalized, it's something that's going to be up and running for all of our areas. So before we move on to the next side of things, perhaps we should stop, see if there's any questions about these research and teaching sheets.
I've got a couple questions.
I just wanted to
I hope I can answer my chancellor's questions. I'm very nervous now.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to add one thing which is really important here too, is when we think about the AAU, we're thinking about all of the metrics that they're looking at, which include things like awards, the honorific awards. And when you look at some of these, what we found, which was really important, was that we could identify which departments had less awards than they deserve, which means when we start to focus our efforts on getting more of these honorific awards, we know which faculty to be promoting. And that gives us real efficiency in how we're going about increasing these numbers.
That's great. That's a great point. Yeah, we find these departments that are well above average grant dollars, well above average journal articles, but then like well below average in awards. So it's like, well, what's going on here?
Well, I mean, English is a good example. So I mean, if you look at them, they are an AAU public average English department, which again shouldn't be minimized. I mean, that's an extraordinarily high bar. It's also, Pat Oker gets mad every time I say this, but this is also one where if you kind of talk on the Mizzou campus and say, what are the great kind of arts and science departments? People talk about psych sciences and they talk about communications. They don't talk about English as much. Well, but if you look at the data, actually, this is a really big deal, and I mean, English departments are a real thing. I mean, it's a big deal. The one thing that they're light on, as compared to their AU public peers, is awards. And if you're high in every other area, but not in awards, then clearly there's something institutionally that needs to happen to try to get more people promoting awards. And we've got some stuff, and we'll look at some analytics coming up here. But just a great example of where there's a really easy area to hit there. You've got a great department, and you've got a real opportunity. And for some reason, historically, we just have not focused enough on getting that kind of national presence out there to get the awards when the opportunities are sitting right in front of you.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful because you can feed this into a lot of the marketing activities, and it's a fair and unbiased approach that nobody can really argue with in terms of, going after more awards. A question I have, assuming that these exist for all of the departments, is I'm wondering if these types of reviews can also be incorporated in the capital planning, as well as, the performance reviews of deans and faculty, and obviously with a plan for getting people on on a path to help them succeed. But I'm assuming that we're going to be using this information to really tailor other decisions that we're making in investments and growth.
Yes.
We're big believers. I mean, the provost, Ramchan, and I talk a lot about ensuring that we are investing in our strengths. And this gives us one way to make sure that we are looking at those strengths. So, yes.
I think that we've always had pretty good, data gathering in terms of individual faculty. Right? You can look at an individual faculty member, see what they did, over the years and that sort of stuff. But one didn't have a comp, so really, so-and-so published, 2 articles this year. What does that mean in their discipline? But really kind of being able to put it all together at the department level, combining it with that individual faculty data is really going to help us going forward.
I think one of the other keys here, and this was something Alex did pretty early on in the process, we made the decision to make these public across campus. And so you need a Mizzou ID to get into them. But if you're in the English department, you can see the history department. If you're in the history department, so all of this is public across the entire university. What that helps do is a few different things. I think it helps different departments realize where strengths and weaknesses exist within colleges and across campus. I think that helps deal with a lot of the myths versus realities. I mean, over the course of 180 or some years, you would expect some ups and downs, and in the absence of any of this data, you just don't know. What it also does is it allows us to really set the definitions for what these different variables are, and then hold people accountable based on those definitions. If we look back in the last 20 years, we use data a lot, but as a department chair, I used to shift the definitions a little bit from year to year to tell the best story I possibly could. And if there was no actual university version, then that's how you get, eventually get promoted, I guess. But with this here on every one of these pages, well, I might go back to being fired soon, but every one of these has what the data definition is on every one of these variables. And so we're also trying to institutionalize what we mean by grant dollars, what we mean by a journal publication, what we mean by conference proceedings. That wasn't, these scorecards flex based on what different disciplines do. If we would have popped open electrical engineering, then conference proceedings would come out. Conference proceedings are an actual thing. If your field puts them into a PDF and then puts them on a website, that's not a conference proceeding. They actually have to be published. And so it establishes what the base is for these, so that then when we look year in, year out on our faculty, departments, colleges, or universities getting better, we've got a consistent variable that we can track on over time. So these same data are the ones that go into our college research growth plans, the same ones that go into either chair or dean evaluations, to try to keep some consistency so we can actually see what's happening over time.
I agree. So let me just add a few comments here. What you see is the accumulation of really tremendous amount of work by Chris, by Matt, and also the teams in IR and Data Warehouse. But what they provide is a consistent, uniform way, unbiased, using the best data that's available to evaluate our departments. And so you're right. We can pick out what are the myths, what are the truths, and also identify ways that our leaders can make investments in areas of strength, but at the same time, divest from areas that are not performing well. Now, we're going to be fair. We're not going to come in one day and say, here's your data, we're going to divest. We needed to see a plan of how to improve. But if we don't see that, we are going to be divesting and into making investments into programs of strength. So, tremendous amount of work.
So we were talking about this on the drive down here. It was Matt and Latha and I. When the original program review task force came out, after we hadn't done something like that, and I don't know how long it was, there was a bit of on campus. We haven't talked about this at all, and now all of a sudden you want to do this and you want to do that, do this. What we're shifting to is this stuff is all permanently available, and they are constantly being asked questions about it. And so after year one, you can say, we haven't looked at it in 15 years. And after year two, it's 2 years, and the 3 years. But now that narrative starts going to where, we're having the same conversation, the same problems exist, and it could be a whole department or a program, or it could be just, you've got an amazing department, but honestly, the PhD component of it's just not popping, it's not really thriving, so maybe that needs to be pulled out. But it's constantly there and available, and nobody's really getting a shock. So, but honestly, the benchmarking side of this is kind of it's extraordinarily important, but it is kind of the more judgmental side, what's strong and what's weak. What we want to shift into next is an entirely different use of these tools. So once you've got people in place, once you've got the programs you want to invest in, really it's how do we maximize what individual faculty can do. And then how do we know in a broader sense and publicly project in a broader sense what we do? I think one of the challenges that universities have, and this is not the University of Missouri system, but I think this is all universities, is trying to explain to people the breadth of what research goes on. I think we started this in December when we started really kind of kicking in and trying to develop these tools, and we've come a pretty far away since then. So the first thing I want to look at is something called Research Insight. Research Insight started being available to all chairs, deans, provosts, research, and basically administrators of one ilk or other across system in late December. What this does is it allows individuals to go in and look and search by either keywords in particular areas, and so Matt's going to end up doing a search on alcohol or alcohol research. We could also search for individual people. We'll do that in a different one. And you can do that across either the system, if you click that one, you can do it across the system, you can do it across the state, you can do it at a specific institution, or you could do it nationally. And so depending on the type of question you want, if you want to know at S&T, who do we have that does, explosive engineering science, which is super cool. It's far more cool. I'm a school psychologist by training, and that's simply way, way cooler than what I do. You could say across the system, where do we have different pieces of talent across the state? Or if you want to look nationally and say, okay, we have a strength in alcohol and addiction research, and we want to attract some people, where are some strengths nationally? If you want to do the search on alcohol across the system. And what this is going to do, of course, we're doing a demonstration, so it can't possibly work, but it did. This is going to show you who our top alcohol addiction researchers or alcohol researchers are across the system. If you go up and down this, you're going to get a variety of people. This is a particular area of strength. Addictions research in general is a real strength across our system. And if you look at this, there's a bunch of different ways to look at this. Can you click on the networks piece up above before we hit one of these individuals? Up, yeah, right there. So what this is showing is the different networks of researchers that exist at our institution and who works with who. And so you've got Matt here. Matt's got a whole bunch of research collaborations, and then he's going to pop up into the psych sciences group. And what's interesting about this is you're going to see who's working with who, and to some extent, who's not working with different people, and they might have leaks. Now you might find out people aren't working together, and you ask, why aren't you working together? And they might hate each other, or they might, so there might be reasons why they're not all that compatible, or they just don't. Well, it is a university, so this does happen. Or they literally just might not know each other. So one of the things that I did was right when I got control of this, I of course just looked at myself and looked at my own area of research, and that's my faculty life coming back to me. There were some people nationally that I really should have been reaching out and contacting that I just really didn't think of them in that particular way, and was kind of an interesting way to look at it. So there's a whole bunch of ways to look at these different collaborative networks, and but within this kind of topic area presentation, it gives you a really good feel for who's doing what, and the different lines reflect different things. They're either grants or book chapters or books or articles, and I think if you highlight, like Matt, just go to your little button here, or just click on this little thing here. And so it's going to show exactly how many articles he's collaborated on with this different group. If he clicks on show works, it's going to show each one of the works. If the works don't click on the ISBN because it'll pop off. But if you click on the DOI, it's going to actually bring you to that work. And if our library has a subscription to it, which it does, you're going to be able to pop into it, pull the article down, and be able to read the article. So
if I'm Matt Martin's chair, right, I might look at this and I'm trying to provide, some advice or guidance. It's like, okay, you're doing good work, blah, blah, blah. We're going to keep you around. Notice you're only connected to one researcher at MU who's doing work, in this area. It's a good person to be connected to, but have you thought about trying to establish, I know Dr. Carlo over in, HES. Do you want me to put you in touch with them? You hire somebody new, right? Somebody's brand new to the system. You can see, what their area is, and as a chair and, as a mentor, you can kind of look, and it's one more tool that we can use to try to help people, move where they need to be.
Here, pop back to scholars, and let's pop open Kenny. So if you go to our top person is Kenny Shear. Okay, so on this first page, it's going to give you a brief overview. He's got 190 articles, 8 awards, 2 books, 21 book chapters, and 8 grants. These are grants where he's the PI on the federal grant. Kenny's got a lot more grants that he's been a participant on. If you pop open any of these, it'll go through them all and show you what they all are. If you go to timeline, it gives you kind of a nice way to look at what somebody's done. He had a soft 2018 with basically as much productivity as I've had in the last decade, but what are you going to do? And so it'll give you kind of a nice overview of the different pieces. And again, if you click on any of these, it'll bring you to where you can get it and you can get the information. All right, so that's all cute, but then the fun stuff. Hit related terms and people. Okay, so this is a really interesting way to look at his research, and honestly, when I first started looking at this, I kind of thought it was a parlor trick, but the more I've started to play with it in my head, the more important I think it is, and there's a way that we can actually allow our faculty to influence what this is out there. This is trolling all of the titles of his work in his abstract, and these are the words that come up the most often, and so alcohol and personality and drinking and Greek life, etc. These are the terms that if you search for him nationally on databases, he's going to pop up on. And the trick here, if you take somebody like me who has not been as broad as Dr. Shear is, I was always trained to use very specific technical terms. And they're, of course, terms that nobody would ever search for. So I'm a behavior assessment researcher, but I really want to do that to increase, essentially, child education or academic education in schools. Better behavior leads to better education. So I should have been using terms like child mental health or child success or stuff actual humans would search for. Instead, I use terms like direct behavior ratings or stuff nobody would ever look for. So I was really, based on how you would search for me, restricting who would find me nationally. Now, in 2000, that didn't matter because nobody searched for anybody else. In 2019, this is the way this actually works. So if you go down here, here's a list of people who are similar types of researchers. Now, for him, this isn't that big of a deal, but when I looked at this as a chair, one of the biggest challenges I have is when we do P&T reviews, how do I find people that would be good external reviewers of an individual who are in a similar area? Our educational school counseling psych, I knew school psych, I didn't know counseling, I didn't know quant. This is actually giving me a whole list of people who have similar research lines. I can click on any of them, see if there's any sort of collaboration. If not, that would be a good person for review purposes. This is also a really good list of people to suggest, hey, have you thought about working with these individuals? Have you started, and again, Kenny knows plenty of people, but you can imagine for assistant, associate early fulls, that's big.
We've already seen this.
Well, no, hit his collaboration because it's just a riot. So this is his collaboration network. Jeez. I know. All right, so for most normal human researchers, this is far less populated. And as a chair, I would say you're probably collaborating with too many people and you might want to restrict a little bit or something of that nature. Actually, as a chair, I wouldn't say anything to him at all. I'd just let him kind of keep doing what he's doing. If you click on any of these, it'll say what the collaborations are, what they do, and all that kind of stuff. One of the things, and Moon and I, we were looking at this, maybe a month or two ago. When you look at these collaborative networks, there are people who have decent research lines but have 4 or 5 collaborators total. And then there's people with 15 or 20. Now, I've been lucky in my career to have a lot of collaborators. And what that's meant is that when I went into administration or as a department chair, I keep being productive because that whole collaborative network is productive. If you're productive with 2 or 3 people and one person gets sick, it starts to break down. So really working with people to try to expand those networks so that they've got a lot of different ways that they can sustain productivity over their entire career versus having a good 5 years or 10 years or something like that. All right, the suggested funding, what this does is it takes his research interest and backgrounds, it ties it into current open federally sponsored research or grants. When I go through this for somebody like me, I would say 50% of them I can ignore immediately. They don't fit. But what I did find was almost all of my funding has been with the Department of Education. I don't do a lot with NIH or NSF, even though there's more money there. But in the type of research I do, there's actually a ton of opportunities in those areas. And so, this actually highlights what those are, what they specifically would be. If you click on any of them, and you don't have to now, it will actually give you the abstract, it'll give you the link, it'll give you when it's due. There's actually opt-in notification, so I can click on one of these and it'll remind me when it's going to be due, so it'll kind of keep saying, are you writing and writing and writing?
So this can be critical.
Yeah.
For our, one, for our faculty development, but 2, helping us move towards our institutional goals. I mean, if we have a goal, which we do, to increase, research funding at the institution, well, what are ways that, that we can do that? Well, one way would be just to tell everybody to work harder, okay, but that's only, part of the solution. We have to be kind of, smarter, more tactical. So you're a chair, working with your faculty member's interested in X. I don't know X, as well. I go to this tool, all of a sudden I've got a list of potential funding opportunities. And this is going to be particularly useful, I think, for people in areas where there's not as much funding, where you have to be, more targeted. If you work in drug abuse, we know that there's an NIH institute devoted to that. Fine. We're always going to be able to look for funding from NIDA. For other areas, it's going to have to be more, more precise. So, I don't know what this whole suite costs. Chris does and President Choi does. But if this gets us 5 grants that we otherwise wouldn't have received, I mean, that's, it pays for itself, right off the bat.
Can you do me a favor? Can you close out, Dr. Scheer, and can you search for me really quickly and then pop open suggested honorific awards? Okay, so one of the things that
Are you trying to say something here?
What? No. So switch over to if you just type in keywords Riley Tillman, there's not many of me, so it works out well. So one of the areas which Alex and I, we noted when we started looking at this data a year or so ago is just how far behind we are in awards versus everything else. I mean, it is our weakest area as compared, and that's not a great thing considering that that should be an area of where it shouldn't be lagging everything else. So when I popped open one of the things that popped open is this fellow for the American Psychological Sciences. So what this does is this trolls all of my productivity and then everybody in the database who's won awards and says, here are awards that people like you have won, okay? And then it rates us up from a 0.5 to a 0.9 or 1 on how likely or how similar I am to people who've won these awards. And I played with this, and people without much research production, you pop them up, it didn't say anything. And so it's not suggesting awards for everybody. It's suggesting awards for people who've got an awful lot of research productivity. It's also going to highlight their particular prestige level. So if we pop open at Mizzou somebody like Chris Pierce, it's going to pop open some highly prestigious stuff. For me, prestigious is going to be pretty good. So the APS Fellow, it's a prestigious award. If you pop that open, it's going to provide an analysis. This one right here, yeah. Pop over to award analysis on the right. Okay, so what this does is it provides an analysis of the overall awards, and in the dark bands is where people from the University of Missouri, one of the across the system, have won the award. And I actually think we're going through my account, so it's probably Columbia as the base unit. So if you look here, and you don't click on it, but if you highlight this right here, see the dark band right here? Okay, that's the University of Missouri. There's 9 scholars who have this award, and they're all in psych sciences. And it makes sense. Our psych sciences department is really quite fantastic. But for me, the interesting one that I started playing with is if you look at this band right here, it's Ed Psych. That's what I do, so that's strange. And if you go down here a little bit more to this big fat one right there, that's university, and click on that. About 80% of my VETA is the same as Sandy's. We work together, almost all of our grants together, 2 or 3 books together, most of our articles. She got this award in 2010. So this is an award that my primary collaborator, the closest person to me nationally, won 9 years ago. That's prestigious. She can nominate me, right? This is diving through this database it took me about 5 minutes to look at something. If you take my department, I'm about the 7th or 8th most productive person in the department. You take Matt and pop him open, or some of these other people, Wendy, there's tons of these opportunities that are just sitting there. I had never thought of APS as a particular option it's not in the culture of my department to look at that. It didn't take any time to pop that So what that tool gives us is a real opportunity to look at our faculty, not only know that we ought to be winning more awards in the area, but specifically saying, like we'll go to departments and they'll say, well, in my field, there's no awards. And then we'll pop open the data and there's awards all over them. There's this and there's this and there's that. And then reach out to those faculty and say, let's help you let's go through the process. I can't imagine what it'd be like to have a chancellor's office or provost office call me up and say, hey, we want to nominate you for this award. That's not all that likely to happen for me, but for other people, it's a great way to get that information, and to really support faculty.
So again, this is a way we're using data to systematic data to improve a number of different things. But this is, I think, helping with the buy-in on campus because we're using the same data sources. Of course, we're going to do evaluation. That's critical. That's baked into our rules. It's baked into our accreditation. It's going to make us better. But now we're using the same data sources to tell faculty, we're going to make you better. We're going to help you get these awards. We're going to help you get new grants. We're going to help you develop new collaborations. Then the last piece, so let's move on to the external.
Yeah, so any questions on Research Insight before we hop into the next week?
I'm just curious if you're aware of how many other universities are using an approach like this?
Well,
are we ahead or behind or right in the middle of the pack?
No. So we, other places are using it. We're using it in a very different manner. Because we're taking the data, integrating it into all the scorecards, making it a part of everything that we do, that's quite different. The Research Insights portal, some of our peers are using it, not a lot. And when we say use it,
it's a new tool, though, right? It's only about a year old.
But I think one of the things that we've done is jump in full with a number of these different options and really start working with these companies so that we can, it's a mutually beneficial deal. We want to have access to their tools right as they're coming out. And so on Monday, we were on a conference call with them. There's a way we can tile this and look in different areas and publicly front, what we do in a broad area. Princeton and us will be the two places that do it. So I keep joking with them, we'll be your large school state university, and then if you want to do Princeton or what, that's fine. But and so essentially no one is using the tools to the level that we are. I think Matt and Muna are going to, at the APLU meeting coming up in November, actually kind of show off some of the ways that we're doing this and some of that. So
The reason I ask is because I would imagine that your high performers would really love this and that it could become a real recruitment tool, because high performers like to be evaluated based on their objective accomplishments as opposed to political nonsense. So
That's a
I
really good
applaud
point.
it.
yeah. Okay, so this next thing that we're going into, and this is a beta version of this site. The site will be fully up and live and running in May. We plan to then essentially do a soft rollout over the summer, and then in August, September have a large-scale rollout. This is a publicly facing site, so anybody in the world is going to be able to get information on this. And essentially what it does is it takes the research insights data, none of the benchmarking data, but the research insights data, turns it around and faces it nationally. So same thing again, you can search on research topic or you can search on name, and then click on the universities. We can do all universities in our system, or click on like S&T, or you can search just S&T. You can search, just UMK. So if you're in Kansas City and you really want to know who does math intervention work in Kansas City, you're not looking across it, you can specify that, or you can look at the whole system.
So we've been, it's like, so how would this be used? Well, our leaders, our communications teams could point people, look, if you're in St. Louis and you need experts in this particular area, go to the site, you type in, and our folks, our folks show up there. If you're trying to highlight, different things that you do. And again, one of the differences here is that these are going to pull up like actual accomplishments, right? Because it's tied into the data. People are going to see like, oh yeah, so Professor so-and-so says that they do work in this area. Then you look at their CV and, they did 20 years ago, but it's not, but it's not there anymore. With these tools, you can see, oh, wait a second, Professor so-and-so has like 3 active grants in this area. This is the person that I want to talk to try to help this problem that I'm trying to solve.
So let's look at this a couple of different ways. Can you search for Wendy?
Search by person?
Yeah, scholar name and do Rinke. Okay, so we search for particular scholars. It gives us Wendy. Click on Wendy.
Oh, that might not be working yet.
I think click on her name.
Oh.
There you go. And this is going to give you a whole bunch of different information. First, this is updated nightly. So if you've got, the data is fully up to date. It gives us her awards list. And so she was a fellow. She's had a Division 16 Early Career Award. She had an SSSP award. It gives us her publications, and it shows a couple of these. But if you hit the expand button on her publications, and you go, I of course brought a Mac, and Matt hates Macs. It gives you all of her publications on any of these. If it's a journal that allows its abstract to be pushed, it'll show more, and you can actually read the abstract. But you also got the DOI so that you can click and go to the actual article. It gives you her grants and patents. Now the grant and patent data is interesting. Right now it's using the academic analytics data, but our research office has provided all of the grant data for all of system. And so it's going to have every grant that we've got, state contracts, everything, so that we're showing all of our full grants, not just federally funded or particular categories. So Wendy's a good example. I think Wendy's had like 40 million in funding since she's been here. She's got a lot more grants than this, but these are the ones that she was the primary PI on. There's a team of a couple of them there. What this also has is similar scholars, and so these are people who she works with, and you can click on any of them. So click on Keith, for example. It's right here. Keith is a similar scholar, Wendy's spouse, and so we can go through and see there. If you click on system collaborations there, these are the different people that Wendy collaborates with across the system. And if you click on any of those bubbles, it's going to show you or this is Keith now.
So you can see this is the same, it's using the same technology, but just pulling it from different sources. This would be an external facing. If for whatever reason somebody needed to pull this together, we'd be able to get it right there. Yeah, John.
Well, as we're doing this for the MU campus, are we getting this for the professional schools, for example, the medical school? And with medical school, are we getting all of the clinical folks that are part of MU Health? Do we get the data on them as well so we could actually do individual searches?
So what we're doing in this first round is everybody who has a research title, so tenure track faculty, or research NTT faculty, and it's for the whole MU system. What we don't want to do is for example, put a number of people up who don't do a lot of research, because nothing will populate on the site. This is all research data, so it's all grants, and it's that type of information. It wouldn't show. I mean, somebody could be an amazing surgeon and have a tremendous amount of impact, but that's not going to show up in pure research terms. In order to deal with, like, Marshall's got a bunch of people, and I don't know the exact number, who actually have very, very large-scale grants and a lot of research productivity. We can't add every single person in an extension because lots of people wouldn't have anything. But anybody, like Susan would be a good example, we can add spot people. So if we're missing somebody who does have good research production outside of a research title, we can add them, and we can have them up on the site within 24 hours.
But you can add clinical research faculty
Absolutely.
members, right?
If there's any research title, and if a chair calls over and says, you got to have this person, they'll be up on the site within 24 hours from when we get the...
Law faculty are on that list?
Pardon?
Law faculty members are on the list?
We're adding law faculty right now, and I've got a meeting on Monday to work with them on how to get their information in. Law data doesn't populate really well. It doesn't database all that well. But can you click the user login down on the bottom right? Okay, so the other side of this tool here, I'll do this piece.
I should step away.
Is that Research Insight tool. Okay, what's my password? Wait, I wrote it down here. I did. I love this stuff, but I'm not good at computers. What are you going to do? This is the internal-facing version of Research Insights that every single faculty member, every research faculty member will have on themselves. So they'll be able to do all of those same searches, all of those same things without having to go to a department chair or a dean or whatever. And they also are going to have the opportunity to take a look at their own individual profiles and add specific things into their own profile. So this is now me in my profile. And if I want to add a particular activity, this is where it's going to be really important for law faculty, I can add particular things that I've done. Okay, so if I go, if I look in the external version, I think I've got one down here in like 2011. One of the things I do, which doesn't database well, is I run a large-scale educational warehouse of evidence-based interventions. And it's, whether it's a research activity or not, I've got about 80 or 90,000 people who go to the site a year. That's not something that databases. It's not something that projects in any of the stuff out there, but I think it's important. And so I can add this. And if we go to me on my individual page, this pops up now as something that I'm doing. So one of the things I've really tried to work with faculty to get is, in 2010, you owned your Vita, right? You controlled your Vita. It was a PDF you had on your document. In 2019, you don't own your Vita anymore. There are now public-facing versions, whether it's ResearchGate or Google Scholar or whatever. What we're doing is we're taking all of that public information and we're putting it in one place, and then we're giving faculty the option to add what they want to add to fill out the narrative of their experience, to explain what they do, and then all of that information is then database so that if you search for evidence-based intervention, it's going to pop me up because of this particular terms. I
accidentally closed it.
Well, that's all right. I also can augment the search terms that I want. So if I haven't been using child mental health enough, I can put that in there so that I'm then caught and focused on with child mental health. So
this is maybe a good place to stop and questions, comments, discussion.
Yes.
You know, so you guys said this was for the administrators, especially the linking tool. And a lot of our inter-faculty campus conversations throughout the year, they talk about not knowing, who to reach out to or what other researchers may be in their discipline. So can individual faculty get into this and see who they're not spiderwebbed with and make those connections?
That's where the publicly facing tool will be really useful. Because it's like there's stuff that's internal to each of the each of the campuses, but that's a great example of well, why should we have an external facing tool here? Well, this gives us the opportunity to see who we should really be able to connect with at some of these different institutions. And again, it's not based on what people say or reputation or what have you. You can actually see, oh, this is actually somebody it's probably worth my time to try to connect with because they've been really, really productive over the last several years.
Yep. And that's each faculty member will have two versions. They'll have the inward-facing versions of Research Insight, so all of those collaborative networks we were showing. They also would have access to the external portal, which has a little less clarity on the collaborative tool, so that I think they'll use the internally facing one. But they'll have access to both of those.
I was just, probably a question more for Cameron if she's in here.
She is. Cameron?
Are we marketing this? I would think the legislators would be happy to hear.
You picked all the pictures too, to be fair. Yeah, you any of the design elements and stuff.
I was just telling, I was just talking a second ago about how one day we geeked out together and it was showing me all the things that it was capable of. And the power of this tool is pretty.
Yeah, so any time somebody from one of our universities is out, and you're in a place where you've got access to the internet or what have you, and let's say something comes up that's relevant, you can pull up right then and show, look, this is what we're doing at S&T, this is what we're doing at UMSL, this is what we're doing at UMPC. These are the people that you need to that you need to talk to, and there's a million things that we probably haven't even thought of yet. That as we start to really roll this out and opportunities arise, we'll see.
Can I just add a comment to that? We have a research growth plan that talks about how we really will double our research. A key component of that is what we expect from communications. And we know that peer review isn't only based on what you're putting in front of them to review. It's based on what they believe you are capable of also. And so the more that we can put our names out there, the more we can talk about what great things are happening, the better it is for us overall in terms of funding.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, this is accountability and measuring success, but not just in a way of, in a penal way if you're not performing, but people want to know, what do I need to improve upon and how do I do it? And hopefully in areas where we may be underperforming, these tools will help. And if, it's giving all of the tools to the individuals at their disposal to make those connections, and I think it's very empowering for the faculty.
Well, one of the things that so on the call on Monday when we started overviewing this tiling tool, which I think we're going to use as there's a way to do this as the entry portal. So essentially saying at a system level, here are the 8 things, like eight areas that we want you to look at, and then at each campus they might have their 3 or 4 things, and those could be different based on which you flex into. But one of the powers of that particular tool, I think, is both internal and external marketing, right? So if you say you want to go down X path, we can put together the data and say, okay, do you want us to publicly front this? Because at least in my experience, like every department I talk to and everybody's got a story and everybody's got some great stuff and all that kind of stuff. Well, we can pull the data and say, okay, are we really world-class in X? And what exactly does that mean? And at least for me, the more I dive through this data, the more I'm surprised about things like English, where I'm like, why has Iowa done such a great job talking about that as a core of the university? And this is sitting right here and is a real strength. I just, without these types of presentations, both internally and externally, I just don't think we know about all of the different things that exist all over the place. For a variety of reasons.
Yeah, the marketing of all the good things we're doing is outstanding, but I would say even just the fact that we're measuring these things, if it is a differentiator for the University of Missouri, I think I would scream it from the top of the mountain, because that is different, and holding to the principles of accountability that we are aiming for, I think it's an outstanding story for us.
It is.
Because we're the show me state.
It is. And it's accountability as well as our path to achieving excellence. And I think that's very powerful. Marcy, you had a comment?
I think you answered this earlier, but it's updated nightly.
Yes.
And there's an internal set of information and external. Who makes the decision where a piece of information goes?
You mean whether it goes internal or external?
Yes.
So any of the benchmarking data is always internal. So we don't release any of the comparative information internally, or we don't release any of that externally. Any externally released data is already externally available, unless faculty put it in themselves. And then faculty do have the option, if they have a particular piece of scholarship that might be quite controversial or sensitive, they have the option to pull down individual pieces of scholarship if they're being targeted for a particular publication or something. So we don't put anything out publicly unless it's already publicly available in databases, or anything that benchmarks or is comparative in nature.
And who has access to internal?
The internal. So with the departmental scorecards, anybody at the University of Missouri who works at the University of Missouri would have it. With the actual full benchmarking suite, it's going to be department chairs, and they would have access to just their department. Deans who would have access to just their college. Provost chancellors, heads of research would have access to their university. People have access to their particular domain of supervision.
Thank you.
So the most exciting part about the suite of tools that are available is the one that provides the faculty members with grant opportunities that are ahead of them, as well as awards that they qualify for. How will they access that database?
So there's going to be two ways to do it. First of all, they will have individual portals that they can log into. Of course, a department chair could also work with them on it, but starting, it's going to be May or I think May or early June, they'll actually be able to go in themselves. One of the tools that's been recently developed that we're going to pilot, they'll also be able to opt in and then highlight areas. And once they've opted in and highlighted an area, so it could be grant opportunities in relation to alcohol, every time one pops up, they'll get an email about it. One of the things I also have there is, which is something we're going to trial out here, anybody in their collaborative network who publishes anything, they'll get an email about those publications so that they can really understand what's happening within their collaborative network. The same thing can be done with awards deadline. So it can either be a chair working with their individual faculty. Our provost office and our research office are actually hiring somebody to specifically focus on awards to reach out. It could be them logging into the portal themselves, and they have the option to get that push information, which is automatically sending them material.
So some of the tools are currently available at Mizzou. When would when would the tools be available for the entire university?
So for the whole system, Research Insights is available.
Research Insights available.
And so that's is, as of, I think it was late December, that's fully available. The actual website itself will go live, and again, it's a system website, so it's for the whole system. It'll be in mid to late May, early June when we get a final version of
And
this.
as you know, the academic analytics comparative database is available to the full system.
Right.
The scorecards, where we've translated those into raw numbers and kind of done some customization, that'll really be up to the campuses or the universities to decide. You know, it took us a while to build those, and you know, I would say, Chris is the expert in this area, but I'd say, you know, maybe a couple more months, because there's still some, you know, some types of, some kinks that we're working out. But then it'll be a matter of figuring out how to, you know, port that to the other universities. But since it's been built already,
Yeah.
So your team will be available to help support the universities to actually develop those scorecards?
like not the coding. Like,
No, not the
me.
coding, but
That's
the
not happening.
templating and so forth.
Yep.
Yeah.
So for example, if you have a scorecard for physics, I would imagine that the template would be any different than physics at S&T.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, we're happy to go on the road
That's
if our
great.
provost will let us.
Well, she's nodding her head, so thank you, Provost Ramchan.
She's a system team member.
Yeah. So, yes, John? No, go ahead.
I want you to finish.
No, you go ahead.
So externally, and the listing of peer-reviewed or other substantive publications, is that now currently up to the extent you've populated certain schools?
We have a beta version of it, and it's system. It's not Columbia. It's the whole system.
So a beta version. So when will it be populated so I, as John Q. Public, can go in and check some research in a particular department in which I'm interested?
Late May, early June.
Thanks.
I want to say one other thing, too, that Julie brought up about accountability. You know, when we started using the research and teaching sheets with, you know, with departments, it's, you know, there have been a couple of departments that have really pushed back. Then there have been a couple of departments that have been like, this is the greatest thing of all time. Where have you guys been all my life? Most departments kind of in the middle, you know, express some, you know, some concerns, might see some things. Well, the data can't be right. There's some errors here, you know, but we've worked through that, and I have been pleasantly surprised by the number of units that have, you know, essentially it's been like, yeah, we do need to work on this area, you know, over here. Or, wow, we didn't realize we were as good as we were in, you know, on journal articles or whatever. That's something for us to, you know, to build on. So, not being Pollyanna here, we've certainly had some challenges, but I have been, and we've had some really good department chairs that have shown some good leadership there and saying, no, look, folks, this is what we're doing, and this is going to make us better.
One of the things we've tried to do in Columbia is when people say the data's wrong, which happens, instead of them sending me an email and yelling at me, which is fine, we actually have a series of steps that we want them to go through. So we want them to talk to their department chair, and want the department chair to talk to the particular dean contact, and then the dean contact would come to us. And so I had some examples of where somebody said, you know, there's all of these publications are missing, and then when the list comes, they're encyclopedia entries. And it's healthier for that chair to have a conversation with their dean, for them to say, you know, stop it. Those are not peer-reviewed publication. That is a different category than for it to be Jesse. So some of it is institutionalizing a process of where that back and forth, you know, what is a conference proceeding? A conference proceeding is not making a PDF of a conference. It's an actual publication of the conference, and there's a way that you do that in an official manner. So breaking that apart. The departments that I've been, one of ours on campus, Women's and Gender Studies, I've been really excited about, how excited they are to augment their current public-facing information with things they want to add that's important, and also how they're working with their field to say, okay, no, we got to get these journals indexed, Because if they're not indexed, nobody can see them, and they're not actually counting. So really help pushing different areas of visual studies. Another one in our interview. They're really working to start to have a catalog of the material so that they can be publicly facing. So
That's great. So yes, Alex.
Mention what Curator Brunsick said was really important, is that one of the reasons that we started down this path was because I felt that it was important for us to recognize the excellence in some of our faculty and all of the hard work that they're doing. And we needed the data to be able to say, look, here's some groups, here's some departments, here's some faculty who are doing exceptional work. And we want to be able to reward them. We want to be able to talk about that. We want to be able to publicize that, celebrate it, and not, at the same time, of course, we are looking to at who is not. Right? And it's that complete picture that you get of the university, and can really think about then how you move it forward to an even higher level.
Great point.
You can have performance plans, right? It doesn't mean people are fired tomorrow, right?
Sure.
But if you're not improving,
Sure.
you're not helping all
Yes,
of us.
Right.
Absolutely. And in fact, one of the conversations that we've had is a shift of how do we think about moving departments forward in a collaborative way. Right? There are going to be opportunities where we can see that a department with a small investment, we might be able to really transform what's going on in that department. And so, yes, there's opportunities then to think about how do you improve the overall performance of individuals and departments.
So you may recall that last July, when we had a task force meeting, we asked the questions of the 4 universities, what are your top programs? Well, they came up with those top programs with some gut feeling, or maybe in the case of animal sciences, they knew that it was a nationally powerful department. But I don't think English was included as part of the top departments. But now with the data that is consistent and available for each university, they're able to make that distinction going forward. So I have 3 other chancellors here and 3 other provosts. Just by nodding your heads, do you think that this tool would be valuable for your universities? Excellent, excellent. So you're going to go on the road. Yeah.
we're proud. I mean, this is.
Let me thank Chris, Matt. Chris, happy birthday. Matt, terrific job. Terrific job. But in addition to that, the leadership from the Chancellor, Chancellor Cartwright, and Provost Ramchan, to see this as a tool that's going to distinguish our university, it was very important. So great job.
Chris, Matt, fabulous, that powerful, game changer for our university. Maybe puts us in the game with other universities. But thank you very much in the work you've done. Next item, for the good and welfare of the board. Anybody have anything? If not, I need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second. Cindy, I need a roll call for that.
Curator Burnsick?
Yes?
Curator Farmer?
Yes.
Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Snowden?
Yes.
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
Curator Sunvold?
Yes.
All votes in favor.
And now I need a motion to adjourn the public session.
Move to adjourn.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much to Missouri S&T for allowing us to come in. Thanks for everybody for attending.